Welcome to the second video in the series where we're going to look at actually migrating Active Directory domain services. So in this video we're actually going to look at the migration of Active Directory itself. We're going to look at the FSMO roles and get those migrated and decommission the old domain controllers. My name is Paul Gregory and I'd like to welcome you to this video. As always, please see my email address, Twitter and YouTube channel information on the screen. Please feel free to contact me. And as I've always offered, if there's a particular migration scenario you're interested in, then please feel free to contact me and I'll see if I can produce a video for you. So as I said, this is the second video in the series, so we're going to look at obviously migrating Active Directory and DNS across. Hopefully you've watched the introduction video which outlines the environment, and subsequent videos will move on to converting file replication service to DFSR, migration of DHCP and file server migration. So this is predominantly going to include the four machines which are listed as domain controllers, so QA-DC01, QA-DC02 and 3 and 4. So currently at the moment, obviously the biggest concern we have, as well as Active Directory, is DNS is running on 01 and 02. So not only do we need to migrate DNS, we also need to consider any systems out there which have statically configured DNS to make sure they get reconfigured to point to the new systems, because we're going to get rid of the old ones. And also we need to make sure that we update DHCP to reflect that as well. So we'll switch across to the desktop now and we'll actually start looking at our environment and then start making some changes to it. So the first thing we'll do is we'll look at Active Directory users and computers, and we'll just do a basic test of creating an object and just ensuring that object gets replicated across to our other domain controller. So in our case, only one additional domain controller. So just a very simple test. You could obviously use tools like repadmin and actually get some verbose diagnostic information when looking at the replication of or the health of the replication of your domain controllers. Obviously, with my simple environment, I'm doing some basic tests. So I'm going to connect across to my other domain controller and just confirm that the user object has actually arrived successfully. And again, you'd more than likely make sure that you can replicate back the other way. And as we'll see, we'll sort of just jump into things like Event Viewer, just make sure there's no obvious errors in Active Directory's event log, and also make sure that the DNS log is pretty tidy. So I had some problems earlier on, but actually resolved all of those, and the sort of Active Directory is pretty healthy now. So we're hopefully all okay. Some DNS problems yesterday, but everything's perfectly fine now. Now, before you can actually add a Windows 2012 R2 server into your Active Directory domain from the point of view of being a domain controller, you do need to make sure you're at the correct domain and forest functional level. So we do require Windows Server 2003 domain functional level, and we need Windows Server 2003 forest functional level. So I'm just actually increasing the functional level for my domain, and obviously if you have multiple domains, you have to do that for all domains before you can then go and increase the functional level for your domain. So I'm just actually going into my domain and so my forest, and actually just raising the forest functional level as well. So we should now hopefully see, once that's completed in a couple of seconds, there we go, that my forest functional level has actually been updated. And we can also just go back and look at the forest functional level box and confirm we are at the correct level. If you didn't do that, then you would actually get an error in the wizard under 2012. So let's jump across to our first Windows Server 2012 machine. So this is QA-DC03, and what we'll actually have a look at is installing Active Directory on here, and effectively start off by installing this as an additional domain controller. So the first thing we need to do is install the role. So I'm just going to go and install the Active Directory domain services role. So complete the wizard now. I'm not going to change any other options, and this doesn't require a reboot. It just effectively installs the binaries and allows us to promote a machine into a domain controller. So while we're waiting for that to complete, I'm just going to go and do exactly the same step on QA-DC04. Obviously I could have actually have done these steps already, but again I like to try and show every single step that's applicable, so I don't like to have too much of here's what I prepared earlier type elements. So hopefully we should just be able to, once server managers finish refreshing, just be able to go in and add that role onto the second server as well. And by the time we've done this, hopefully the first role installation will actually be complete on DC03. So hopefully we'll just go and complete this activity. So that's starting to install, and hopefully if we go back to DC03, we can actually see that the domain services has completed successfully. And we've now got the Active Directory domain services on the left and telling us that we need to complete more information. Now DCpromo has been removed as a feature unless you're doing unattended installation, so it now has to be done either through this new wizard or through PowerShell commands. So we'll do this using the wizard. Now the one thing you'll find quite interesting here, where I've chosen I want to add an additional domain to an additional domain controller to an existing domain, is for those that know Active Directory, you would expect me to have to prepare Active Directory for 2012 servers, especially being that my Active Directory is 2003. We will see this wizard will actually do that work for me, so it will highlight to me that that's going to be carried out. So on the domain controller options page, having already chosen an additional domain controller, we're going to specify that we want this machine to run DNS as well, and we also want this machine to be a global catalog server. So those two boxes are ticked. If I needed to specify an alternate site, I could enter the site name, and I'm just going to go and enter my directory services recovery mode password. So pretty simple, pretty straightforward. Not worried about delegation, so we just ignore that. And again, I'm not worried about which domain controller we want to replicate the data from, or what folders we want to store the Active Directory domain database in. But significantly, on the review page here, you will see that all the things that are going to be completed, and we're now going to go and start the process. So this is actually going to run the AD prep domain prep and the AD prep forest prep commands for me to actually go and upgrade the Active Directory schema to the Windows Server 2012 R2 schema. Once that process is complete, it will then actually promote this machine into being a domain controller and reboot this machine. So we'll just go and press the install button now that it's actually checked all of the prerequisites that have been met, and away we go. So you can see us actually effectively doing the AD prep forest prep at this precise moment to go and update the schema for the forest. On the previous page, you would have noticed there was a few warning triangles. Predominantly those triangles are about the fact that the security level has been raised so that NT clients, for example, will not be able to authenticate against Active Directory, and highlights the support documents that you would need to go and review if you wanted to reduce the level of security to allow older NTLM clients, so maybe not necessarily NT based systems, but you might have some older operating systems, maybe of a Linux variety, that need an older version of the LAN manager authentication protocol to be able to authenticate. So this is going to take a little while to complete, and hopefully once this process is complete, and we will speed the video up a little bit here, we will actually see the system go to reboot itself. So the wizard has now completed itself, so we should see that we can reboot the machine, and this will complete the promotion of this particular machine into being a domain controller. So hopefully the reboot process won't take too long. So you can see obviously as the first reboot will occur, obviously there will be some extra Active Directory work for it to do. It will be obviously applying some group policies. So there will be some delays in terms of this system actually starting, but it shouldn't take too long to complete the boot process. In terms of the domain controller promotion wizard, we would then obviously need to complete the same activities against, in our case, QA DC04 to ensure that we've got both of our domain controllers. If obviously you was in a scenario where you was actually then going to install a new domain controller based on one of your old 2003 machines, you are now potentially starting to get to the point where you could obviously decommission one of your 2003 domain controllers and promote that by installing the Windows Server 2012 and then obviously running DCpromo. So as you can see, we're signed in successfully. So hopefully the machine's up and running and behaving correctly. So we'll go into Server Manager to start with. and have a look at some status information. So Server Manager will take a few seconds to go and refresh, but obviously what we should see is the Active Directory domain services appearing on the left hand side. When we've got the green box to tell us it was manageable. You can also see we've got DNS, so it seemed to have the correct configuration, sort of the correct tools. And hopefully if we go into sites and services, you can now see DC03 actually being listed as a domain controller. You can see there's no replication objects there yet. So again, we've just got to wait for some Active Directory processes to kick in. So here, for example, we're waiting for the knowledge consistency checker to actually realize, oh, there's a new domain controller. We need to set up replication links to that domain controller. So these things can take a little while, and again, like all these activities, these would be things you would be doing over hours, days and weeks. Ultimately, me attempting to try and do this in effectively 30 minutes, 45 minutes is really a disproportionate amount of time to how much care we should take with these types of processes. Hopefully if we go and have a look at Active Directory user computers, we can see we've got all of the objects sitting on our machine. Just actually having a quick refresh and seeing if we've got any replication objects yet. So not yet. So again, I'm still being a bit eager in terms of waiting for those objects to appear. So maybe the best thing to do is just to jump across and actually run through the promotion wizard for DC04 and actually turn that into a domain controller as well. So this is going to be exactly the same process as before. Again, we're going to ensure this machine has DNS installed in it, and again we're going to make sure this machine is a global catalog server. And again, really that's one of Microsoft's best practices today, in the fact that most servers, if not all domain controllers, should be a global catalog machine. You need a sort of a specific reason for not making it a global catalog server, maybe a particular security requirement, for example, would be your decision point. So we just completed the wizard exactly the same. Obviously this wizard will actually run through a little bit quicker when it does the promotion, because we don't need to obviously upgrade the forest, we don't need to upgrade the domain, because the first domain controller promotion obviously carried out all of those activities for us. So we should be getting pretty close to obviously being able to reboot DC04 and having our second Windows Server 2012 domain controller in the mix. So we can see effectively we're actually going through the DCpromo process. So we're just checking to make sure that the forest and domain have been upgraded, and going to start the promotion process. So just while we're waiting, it's maybe worth just going and checking, make sure DNS looks okay. So we can obviously go in, again we're looking at it on the 2012 box, so we can actually go into our domain, make sure our DNS records have been registered. Actually you can see QADC03 has been registered as a name server, so it's actually sort of taken over that responsibility. So everything's starting to look like it's coming together from the point of view of the machine. Hopefully if we was to go back into sites and services, we should hopefully start to see now, if I'm not too eager, that the replication objects are there. So we can see all of these three machines have been registered as global catalog servers, and we should be getting close to the replication objects being produced. Obviously what I could do is I could go and force the knowledge consistency checker, but I want to try and avoid that just for the purposes of showing these sort of full processes. So you can see effectively I've been warned that I'm going to be logged out because this machine's going to auto reboot as being the second domain controller running Windows Server 2012. So we should hopefully see that this machine will restart and come up just like DC03. So we can see obviously 3 and 4 are listed in the domain controllers organizational unit in Active Directory. If we go and have a look at a domain controller, we should be able to connect to any of the domain controllers using the management tools, and we should be able to confirm that information's been replicated in both directions. So we can see there DC01 agrees that we have the 4 machines as domain controllers. And again, maybe what you would do is you would go and create a new object and actually wait to make sure that object gets replicated around all the domain controllers. And again, maybe in my scenario it'd be prudent to wait until my 4th domain controller is actually up and running. So switching back to our Windows Server 2003 first DC, just quickly into Active Directory users and computers. Maybe what we're going to do in this instance is delete that test object that I created, so we can hopefully see that test object get deleted. So we'll just go and confirm that it actually gets deleted from DC02, so we can see that it's been deleted from there. Go across to DC03, hopefully go into users, and hopefully with a bit of a refresh we can hopefully see that the object will disappear from there. Again, I'm trying to do this obviously in a very quick period of time, so normally you would be giving the system more time to stabilize before you actually start doing these sorts of things. So we can see it's gone from DC04, so hopefully if we go back to DC03 and just have a quick look in the users object, we should see that the object has gone from there as well. So we can see that replication has completed successfully. So looks like things are working reasonably well, and again there's quite a large amount of tests that you could run. You could obviously start to again run commands like repadmin and actually look at the health of Active Directory if you actually wanted to. Again, maybe just to confirm, I might go and create for example, a test group policy, and then actually see if that group policy gets replicated successfully around all of my domain controllers. So again, I could actually go into individual domain controllers and just confirm that the group policy actually arrives. If I look at the properties of the group policy, so I actually look at its unique name, what we could also do is we could go into the file system and we could confirm that the physical files have actually arrived on a machine, on one of my new domain controllers as well. So let's go and have a look. So the first thing we'll do is we'll just go into the group policy management console, and again we'll confirm that we can view it from there. And obviously the group policy management console by default is going to be reading content from the PDC emulator. So this is actually reading content from one of my 2003 servers. But again, we can just confirm that unique ID information, and we could then actually go into the file system and confirm that's been created, replicated itself. Here we actually have a tool, which is quite a new tool, which actually allows us to confirm the replication of group policy data within the system volume. So you can actually see that we've got a couple of warnings against our 2012 servers. Okay, so first of all, we've got an accessible error against DC04. So hopefully once replication establishes itself, that particular error goes away. The ACL error is actually to do with the different ways 2003 and 2012 handle permissions. So we will actually find that ACL error will stay there, but it's only a warning and it's not something that we need to worry about. So we can see on this particular machine that that group policy does actually exist, and we will find that the group policy error that we're getting in the group policy management console for DC04 will actually tidy itself up, so that will actually improve. So we should see that quite shortly. So if we just jump into the file system on DC04, just go into the Windows folder and again into the system volume, we can just confirm that the physical files have actually arrived, and what we're seeing here is effectively latency in the diagnostic processes, again because we're trying to do everything in a really quick time. So the files aren't there yet, so hopefully what we're going to see as replication starts to establish itself, and we saw how long it took for the links to get created for the 03 server, we should start to see that data actually get replicated across to this machine. So that will hopefully happen within the next couple of minutes. And again, I remember when I used to work with Novell and used to work with eDirectory, quite often one of the pieces of advice from Novell was after you bring a new server online, let the system stabilize and establish itself for the next 24 hours. So whereas we would expect with distributed architectures not to have to wait 24 hours anymore, we do have to accept that there is latency in these systems by virtue of what we're doing. So it will take a little while. So then we can see, that folder's now actually appeared. So things are actually looking much better. So there's been some replication of the group policy data in here. So that should also start to allow us to see that we've actually got our connectors for replicating. So we saw them there for DC04, and we would have them for all of the domain controllers now. So the knowledge consistency checker has kicked in, and it's established all of our replication connections. So switching back to one of our 2003 servers, so in this case I've picked on QADC02, and I just keep mixing the machines that I'm using, just so that I'm just not looking at everything from a single position. I want to be able to make sure that we are changing things. Now DC02 is actually the machine that's running our DHCP server. So what I want to do is I want to actually change the IP addresses that are being allocated for DNS. Because I'm going to decommission my 2 old servers, I obviously want all my clients to start going to my new servers for the purpose of DNS Name Resolution. So I've actually gone and set those values inside DHCP. So just asking to my client at this point, if I was to actually just go and have a quick look at my system, we should be able to see that I'm using QADC02 as the last logon server. If I go and do an ipconfig/all, we can see that I'm actually using the old systems for the purpose of DNS. So once the DHCP data actually updates itself, we should see that the client will switch now to using DC03 and DC04 for DNS name resolution. Obviously, any servers that you've got that have got DNS addresses allocated to themselves statically, so file servers might be a good example of that, web servers, database servers, then obviously the idea would be to actually go and change those values. And it's also quite important that you more than likely go and change those values on the old domain controllers that you're going to remove as well. So I've actually got an updated DC01 to actually point to the new DNS server, so it no longer points to itself. And you might say, well, why are you doing that? Because you're going to get rid of the systems anyway. Well, because I want to use DCpromo to actually go and demote the machines, which is what I'm about to start here by running DCpromo. I want that removal of Active Directory to be as a cleaner process as possible. And if effectively we remove DNS and the machine stops functioning as a DNS server halfway through the demotion process, then effectively this machine is not going to clean itself from Active Directory. And it's often a big problem where people don't think about this and they get orphaned objects left in Active Directory and have to go in with tools like ntdsutil to clean up metadata. So hopefully what this is going to do is it's going to allow us to demote the machine. Now, one of the decision points you've got when you to perform the demotion with DC01, that machine is running all of the FSMO roles. And if I was to actually run this PowerShell command here, you can actually see the forest-based roles being listed. So we can see for the forest level roles, so the schema master and the domain naming master, DC01 is running those roles. And if we was to do the same for the domain-based roles, we would see that the DC01 is also running the PDC emulator, the RID master, and the infrastructure master. Now I could just run DCpromo on QADC01 and QADC01 would transfer those roles to other servers. Now it might go and transfer them to DC02, which is exactly where I don't want them to be. So in most instances, what I'm going to want to do is I'm actually going to want those roles to be transferred to a system of my choice. So before we actually complete running the DCpromo, what I'm actually going to do is I'm actually going to use the move-AD directory server operations master role command to actually move the roles. So I've specified the name of the domain controller. I've then specified -operations master role, schema master, domain naming master, PDC emulator, RID master, infrastructure master. So this hopefully should then allow me to actually be able to migrate the roles successfully onto QADC03. As always with PowerShell, no error message means success. So hopefully if we was to go into Active Directory user computers on one of the 2003 servers and we was to go and look at the operations master roles, we should see that the operation master roles have been moved onto one of my 2012 boxes. So let's try the DCpromo process again. So we'll actually run DCpromo just like we started to before, and we will basically complete the wizard. So the only sort of question in here is obviously just a warning about what you're doing, obviously a bit of a problem, and are you removing the last domain controller from the domain? Obviously we're not, so we don't need to tick that box. Set the local administrator password, and then just next and finish, and this will actually start the demotion of this particular machine. So this shouldn't take very long to actually complete, and we would need to complete the same steps on QA-DC02. And once these machines have actually finished being demoted, you've restarted them, they should hopefully leave Active Directory pretty clean. What you might find is just an orphaned object inside sites and services, which you would then need to go and clean up. If, for example, you hadn't changed DNS, then you could be in a situation that there was some orphan metadata about, and you might need to go into tools like ntdsutil to actually clean that up. But hopefully here we're actually cleaning this up in a way which, or uninstalling the domain controllers in such a way that it should be fairly clean. Obviously, once the machines have been removed and they've been rebooted, it's then actually up to you. So in my instance, effectively what I would be doing would be switching those machines off and effectively even deleting the computer accounts from Active Directory. I'm not going to reuse them, I'm not going to have them anymore. And effectively I would have migrated my Active Directory to Windows Server 2012, albeit I haven't migrated the system volume replication model. It's still using the old FRS, not the new DFS model, and obviously in video 3 we will look at how we migrate the replication to FRS. So I'll just speed the video up here while we let this process complete and see where we are once we've demoted them. So the demotion process is complete, so we'll actually just hit the restart now and let any tidy up activities that need to happen complete. So that's actually removed the first of our domain controllers, other than any maybe small pieces of tidy up work we would need to go and do inside sites and services. And if I was to go and use commands like repadmin, for example, what we could actually do here is we could actually get it to, for example, list the replication partners that exist. So you can actually see here I've actually got replication partners just for DC02 and DC04. There's no mention of DC01 anymore. So we can actually see, for example, those replication connections have been removed. If we wanted to, we could use the REPL summary command, which could effectively again show us the domain controllers which we accept stuff from and we send stuff to. So again, you can see DC01 has been removed from the list. So these are obviously commands that we could have used rather than looking at graphical tools earlier on. And again, looking, we can see that DC01 has been moved into the computers container from the domain controllers container. So hopefully you can see that that's removed that machine pretty tidily. As I say, the only thing that you do find is you sometimes get an orphaned object in the server's object inside sites and services. There's nothing below it, so if you want to, you can just tidy that up by just deleting that object, and that would be the last step needed to be performed. So we need to go and do effectively exactly the same on QA-DC02. So we won't talk our way through this, we'll just speed the video up and we can see this complete. Okay, so we're going to hit the restart button, and that's effectively demoted QA-DC02. Now obviously QA-DC02 is still really important to us because it's our DHCP server, and in video 4 we'll see how to move the DHCP service away from that machine. So whereas DC01 we could technically switch off now if we wanted to, DC02 still has an important role to play for us within our current network. Again, obviously just using the rep command, so the repadmin summary just showing there's only 2 DCs left. Again, obviously if I wanted to just remove that DC entry in sites and services, I could tidy that up as well. But effectively that has actually got us to the point that we've now decommissioned those two 2003 DCs. So we now have a 2012 R2 Active Directory. All of our domain controllers are running 2012, and hopefully everything's running perfectly fine. Again, you might go off and do some tests and replicate some other objects just to confirm replication's working. All I'm going to do is I'm just going to jump out and just make sure that my clients behave okay. So just while we've left stuff, you can actually see my machine has picked up a new IP address and actually is now pointing to the new DNS servers. So hopefully if we log off, if you remember when we run the set command before, we saw that it was actually pointing to QADC01 for the purpose of its logon server. So hopefully what we should be able to find is we should actually see that when we restart this particular machine, it will actually switch to using either QADC03 or QADC04. So let's just open a command prompt then, and hopefully having rebooted the machine, logged in, we should see that it's been authenticated by one of the new domain controllers. So hopefully we just scroll up in the list, we should then be able to see that we've been authenticated by QADC03. So this is actually now speaking to one of those new domain controllers quite happily, no problems at all. So that's now completed the migration of our Active Directory domain service. Hope you enjoyed watching this video. As always, please feel free to contact me if you have any questions or if there's any videos I could produce for you which you might find of interest. Thank you very much. Bye bye.